And welcome to the End Time Show for our End Time Bible Prophecy Podcast. I'm your host, Gerald. Today's podcast, since it is the holidays, we're fast approaching the New Year's, also too. Christmas will be on December 25th, which is on a Saturday. We want to do an in-depth expose on Christmas, primarily on Santa Claus. So the title of this podcast will be Santa Claus, Saint Nick, Satan, and Paganism. So first I want to start off reading scriptures and we'll get deeply into our lesson. Jeremiah 10:1, verse 10, verse 1 through 2 says, "Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed as the signs of heaven, for the heathens are dismayed at them." So most people, or a large amount of Christians, celebrate the birth of Christ on December 25th. However, the Bible makes no mention of when Joseph and Mary traveled to Bethlehem, went to the manger of Jesus Christ's birthday being December 25th. The early Christians never celebrated Jesus' birthday on December 25th. So with the mixture of when Constantine made Christianity legal within the Roman Empire and some other stuff, a lot of different pagan gods got like a facelift and makeover where they Christianized it and changed their names and did some other things and all. And the root of December 25th is primarily the winter solstice and the celebration, most people say, of the sun god deities such as Matthias or Tammuz. Some people try to equate Jesus to Matthias, that the Bible borrowed from that. That's not actually true. That's a lesson within itself to kind of go through. However, we need to take a look at this because Santa Claus has been around a long time. It's been a tradition, especially here in America, for a long time. Young people during the Christmas season, they're not giving even mind, even if it was Jesus' birthday. It's not a celebration of Christ anyway. It's a lot of consumerism that goes on. People are buying presents for their kids. Some people can't even afford to buy presents for the kids, so they use credit cards, which they max their credit cards out or go into massive debt in order to supply material things for their children. And then also to going to the malls and having Santa sitting there at the mall and having your kids sit on Santa's lap. And you even have some churches who are involved in this foolishness of Santa Claus, having a Santa set up within the children's ministry so he can give gifts out to the kids. But we want to really dig in and see the truth of Santa Claus. So we need to ask the question where Santa Claus came from. So let's take a look at a few things. According to legend, Santa began as a 4th century Catholic bishop named St. Nicholas. The cult of St. Nicholas was one of the history's most widespread religious movements. According to St. Nicholas historian Charles W. Jones, the cult of St. Nicholas was before the Reformation and the most extensive of any non-biblical saint in Christendom. So that's where we get to start. Another popular book, Christmas Almanac, states, by the height of the Middle Age, St. Nicholas was probably invoked in prayer more than any other figure except Virgin Mary and Christ himself. This is found in the Christmas Almanac. So did St. Nicholas actually exist? Was he actually a bishop in the Catholic Church? What we find is Nicholas' existence is not attested by any historical document, so nothing certain is known of his life except that he's probably a bishop of Myra, and that is found in the Encyclopedia Britannica. Nicholas was a saint supposedly that lived in the 4th century, Christian prelate, patron saint of Russia, traditionally associated with Christmas celebration. The accounts of his life is confused and historically unconfirmed. Unfortunately, very little is known about the real Saint Nicholas. Countless legends have grown up around the very popular saint, but very little historical evidence is found. Years of research has confirmed the initial doubt that Santa Claus is a Americanization, all right, but not a Catholic saint. Despite a century of repetition, this story is simply untrue, and we can find this in The Last of the Wild Men, The Origins and Evolution of Saint Nicholas by the author's name is Jefferson, and the publishing company is McFarland and Company Incorporated, published in 1997, page 5 through 7. So where did Santa Claus come from and his origins? So right now, pagans who find around the winter solstice is a high holy day for them, so that's what it's surrounded. But when we look in Norse mythology and other things and all, or Scandinavia, Yule or Groundhog Day was celebrated. So Yule is the pagan celebration of the winter solstice observed on December 23rd through 25th. The ancient Romans practiced Yuletide under the name of Saturnella, and the people of Scandinavia began to worship their ancestors named Odin as the chief god during Yule, and animals such as dogs, horses, chickens were sacrificed to gods and elves. But the worship of Odin required human sacrifices. Lesser items like butter or bread were set out as sacrifices to elves. So here we see the association with elves aren't these little cute little creatures that are such nice and are. They're demonic. And also too, with the Marvel movies, we see with Thor and his father Odin. Odin is the backdrop of Santa Claus, and Odin was a god that was worshipped by people in Scandinavia, and this states that. So here we have Odin, and Odin is one of the sources where we get the makeup or the evolution of Santa Claus. Most ancient legends describe Odin as a sorcerer who lost one eye while performing a ritual. He became able to see through the eyes of his raven spirit guides. Later, Odin was worshipped as the supreme god. It should have been obvious if he was a sorcerer and had to do a ritual to obtain this power that he must not over have been original creator or God creator. All right. So here we see that Odin is a sorcerer. One of the key things when you're watching Marvel movies, some other things, especially with Thor, there's just little subtle messages that are delivered where he equates science to magic, which is some level of truth around a certain period of time. The sciences and the occult begin to separate themselves. So here we have Odin as a prime example of Santa Claus. In Norse mythology, gods like Odin and the nature spirits called Elves were worshipped. The gods were, no doubt, engrafted ancestor worship. Norse mythology divided the universe into 9 worlds. So again, when you look at the Marvel movies, they borrow a lot of these things. And just in general, will be probably a future podcast that we would do. A lot of the people that write these comics, whether it's DC Comics or Marvel, are heavily involved in the occult, and they know these occult mysteries and these mythologies and all these other things, and they incorporate it as entertainment. So we see that Odin, he rides on a horse. So let's look at Odin and his Ghost Rider. The Wild Hunt, or Odin's Hunt, was a Ghost Rider, and we've seen him riding through the sky. So you would see Odin riding through the sky, and he would have his elves, and the dead warriors of the past could be seen at Yule. And at one time, you may be swept into the realm of the dead. Odin was the one who led the hunt, riding, listen to this, an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir. In traditional lore, Santa Claus' sleigh is led by 8 reindeers: Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, and Dunder, Blitzen, and also too, if we add a 9th reindeer, that would be Rudolph. So here's some things where they begin to incorporate Odin and Santa Claus. He had an 8-legged horse. You have 8 reindeer. So you kind of do the makeover and change the things over, because Satan can transform himself into an angel of light. Also, the book of Isaiah talks about where you'll call good evil and evil good. It is interesting to see how the Norse god Odin changed into Santa. He still comes at Yuletide or Christmas, but instead of coming on his 8-legged horse, he's now rides a sleigh pulled by 8 reindeers. So when we look at Yule, it's one of the periods of time, the winter solstice, where during this time, the spirit realm, the veil, is very thin, just like where pagans worship during the month of October for Halloween, where Halloween is celebrated by people that are in the occult, people that are in Satanism or in witchcraft. The veil is very thin, so it opens up to the spirit realm for divination and other things and all, in the prime time to offer sacrifice, just like Yule is. Yule, we can see that the Celts considered this actually as a time like Halloween, but among the Slavic people of Europe, the veil between the worlds was thinnest in regards to the winter solstice of Yule. So we see the Slavs, they call this Korchun. It is the time when the black god Chernobog and all the evil spirits are at their strongest. A few days later, when the days start to get longer, it is the birth of the new sun, or the god Kabbalah. The Norse and Slavic pagans, we get elves, and living in a world right above ours. So the elves lived up north, the North Pole. So that's where you get like stories about Santa originating, where his headquarters is the North Pole. Even when you look at Isaiah chapter 14, when it's talking about how Lucifer, he says, I will exalt myself above the north. I will exalt myself above all the angels and all in heaven. That's pretty much, I'm paraphrasing that. And Yuletide is nothing more than just Christmas. It's a veil between the worlds and the thinnest. so that elves and ghosts may come to visit and bringing them gifts like healing from disease or punishments like death. This sounds good, but still it's demonic. So you have these demonic elves supposedly that would bring gifts. The elf spirits were also called puka. They came to give gifts and healing to those they liked and hurt those that they did not like, putting switches or coal in stockings. So that's where you get the tradition of putting things in a stocking. Let's go on. The Scandinavians, they said, when the puka enter in the house, one may hear the greeting of ho, ho, ho from the puka elf, which we'll get a little bit more into the phrase ho, ho, ho of Santa. This story intermingles with the legend of Saint Nick, formed the legend of Santa Claus. And we have to also remember that Santa Claus is supposed to be a jolly old elf. All right. So we see the connection of Santa Claus and Odin, but there's also a connection with Santa Claus and Thor. So Thor was the god of the peasants and the commonplace, and he represented the elderly man, jovial, friendly, and heavy build with the long white beard. His element was the fire and his color red. The rumble and roar of the thunder were said to be the cause by rolling his chariot, for he alone among the gods never rode horseback, but drove in a chariot drawn by two white goats called Cracker and Nasher. He was fighting the giants of ice and snow and thus became the Yule god. He was said to live in Northland. This is where you get the North Pole, where he had his palace among icebergs. By our pagan forefathers, he was considered as cheerful and a friendly god, never harming the humans, but rather helping and protecting them. The fireplace in every home was especially sacred to him, and he was said to come down through the chimney into his elements. So we can find this in Myths of the Northern Lands, page 61. So if we can look at some common traits or characteristics of Santa Claus and Thor, let's take a look at several different things that they have in common. An elderly man, jovial and friendly and heavy build. They have long white beard. His elements were fire and his color red. He drove a chariot drawn by two white goats, which Santa had 8 reindeers, but Thor had 2 goats. Nevertheless, it's more or less a sled or a chariot. He was the Yule god, or Yule is, pagans celebrate Yule or Yuletide during the same time as Christmas. He's considered the cheerful and friendly god. He is benevolent to humans. The fireplace was especially sacred to him, and he came down through the chimney into the element, the fire. So Satan really did a serious makeover to make this particular character as looking like he's a really good guy. He's bringing kids gifts and he's jovial. But let's dig even more, because there's some deep demonic roots within Santa Claus and with the connection to Satan. So one of the demons that is worshipped during this time, especially over in Europe, the early part of December, I want to say around December 6th, is Krampus, which is also connected to Santa Claus. So when we look at St. Nicholas or Santa Claus or Christkind, which is connected to different variations or names of St. Nicholas, he had a very unusual helper, And we have to look at this helper. This helper is Krampus, was his sidekick, and he went by different alias names by Rude Claus, Swarthy, Dark One, Dark Helper, Black Peter, Hans, Trap, Krampus, Sorate Pit, Furry Nicholas, Rough Nicholas. It is Christ kind who brings the presents accompanied by the many devilish companions, Nishrepish, Pelnicka, Rude Claus. This is found in the Christmas Almanac, page 70. In many areas of Germany, Hans Trapp is a demon who accompanies Christ's kind on gift giving. And again, this is found in the Christmas Almanac. Another Christmas demon from Lower Austria, Krampus or Grumpus, accompanies St. Nicholas on December 6th. So we can see how St. Nick is accompanied by this demon helper. Like Santa and the Dark Helper, we're supposed to have a peculiar habit of entering homes through the chimney. We can find this. Let's explore some of the writings in the book when Santa was a shaman. Important quotes from the book when Santa was a shaman states the very nature of Santa Claus. In Sarajevo, Bosnia, which is in Bosnia, St. Nicholas appears with gifts for children in spite of the war and shelling. He is assisted by a small black devil who scares children. So God doesn't give us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. So when it's fear, fear comes from the enemy, comes from the devil. He wants to strike up fear in you, that you're paralyzed, that you become panic. One of the things, panic comes from the god Pan, the goat god Pan, to panic, to be stricken with fear. So God doesn't want you to be in fear. When you fear the Lord, it's much more different. You're in awe, the awesomeness of God. You submit yourself unto God. But there's many different names for this dark helper. One of the things that we look at is Black Pete is the grandfather of modern day Santa Claus, known in Holland as Zwarte Piet. This is the 18th century German version, and it's like his ancient Shemitic ancestor, still horn, fur claw, scary, and less than the kind to children. Although portrayed as a slave helper of Santa Claus, the two in many villages blended into one character. This figure often has the name Nicholas or Claus, but has the swarthy appearance of the Dark Helper, which we find in when Santa Claus was a shaman. Move on. In certain German children's games, the St. Nicholas figure itself is the Dark Helper, a devil who wants to punish children, but is stopped from doing so by Christ. Very interesting, right? To the medieval Dutch, Black Peter was another name for the devil. Somewhere along the way, he's subdued by St. Nicholas and forced to be his servant. On the eve of December 6th, the myth told that this bearded, white-haired old saint, clad in wide mantle, rode through the skies of the white horse. That's very interesting, riding on a white horse, because the book of Revelation states how the Antichrist, the false peace, which symbolizes the Antichrist, will be riding on a white horse. That's just a mental note. Just stop and pause there. So we read on. This reluctant helper had to disperse gifts to good people, but much preferred to threaten them with his broom-like scourge, and at a sign of his master, would gleefully drag sinners away to the place of eternal suffering. So let's look at Santa's title, Nick, and the devil. So we're putting all the pieces of the puzzle together in regards to Santa Claus. And I know parents, your kids, Santa Claus is going to bring you gifts and put them underneath the tree. You need to stop lying to your children and just say, Mommy and Daddy, it'll be a surprise if you're going to celebrate. I know some people who come to the revelation that Christmas is very much pagan and they don't want to celebrate it at all. There's still dividing factors in that, because you can still present it in a way, even though we know that Jesus was not born on December 25th, but you can put the focus that if he wasn't born, he wouldn't have been able to die for his sins and salvation. He was able to come and bring salvation. I just want to stop at this point just to explain that, because even within the Christian world, when we look at Christmas, some things are not true. Well, the representation of the three wise men showed up at the manger. The Bible never says that it's three wise men. It does state that there's three gifts that they brought. I believe it was frankincense, myrrh, and I believe they brought him gold, I believe, one of the things. But it never states that it was three wise men. Also, too, if you look at the scriptures and thoroughly read it, and they came passing looking for Jesus, the wise men, through Herod, and Herod gathered the scribes together to read out the word, and found out, like, okay, it's this place, Bethlehem, believe. Let's send where he tried to destroy, which he did. It was infanticide and a bunch of other things that he committed undoing, killing children under the age of 2 and under, because he was like, I'm going to get this Christ child one way or the other. So when we read in the word that Jesus was at least 2 or 3 years old, finally, when the wise men come in contact with him and present him with these gifts. So it wasn't in the manger. I just wanted to stop there. But going back, looking at the connection with Santa Claus and the nickname Saint Nick, it is connected with the devil. Old Nick is a well-known British name of the devil. It seems probable that the name is derived from the Dutch Nikken, the devil. This is found in the Encyclopedia of Occultism and Parapsychology, page 650. Also, Nick the devil. Nick is associated with the devil, which we can also find in the Concise Dictionary of English Etymology, page 304. The devil, besides the name Satan, he is also called Beelzebul, Lucifer, and in popular or rustic speech by many familiar terms as Old Nick, and which is found in the Oxford Dictionary. Nicholas is one of the most common devil's names in German, and a name that remains today when Satan is referred as Old Nick, which we find the origins and evolution of Saint Nicholas. So again, we begin to peel off the layers and we begin to see, unmask the true representation of Santa Claus. Now, said earlier, let's look at Santa Claus' signature, ho, ho, ho. The evil elves spirits were called pukas, which we read about earlier. The Scandinavians said that when Puka entered in a house, one may hear the greeting of ho, ho, ho from the Puka elf. The devil was no doubt introduced from the play, Miracle Plays, where he figured so amusingly. He made as hideous as possible by his mask and dress, the latter being generally of a shaggy, hairy character, and he was duly provided with a tail. His ordinary explanation on entering was ho, 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 which we find this in Frank Arison's Drama Before Shakespeare's sketch back in the 1920s. We go on. In these plays, the devil's common entry line is known as the devil bluster was ho, ho, ho. So the devil's trademark ho, ho, ho was carried over from the early medieval miracle plays to the popular Old English play, Bamillo. And as the following lines from the play verify what come, I conjure thee, foul spirit, come down to hell. Ho, 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 the devil, it comes upon me, which we find this in the selection of a selection of Old English plays, volume 6. So very interesting how the very words ho, ho, ho is connected to Satan, how we peel back the layers and really expose that we're celebrating Santa Claus, but in reality, we're celebrating Satan. And just want to conclude with some scriptures. It's mass deception, people. When we look at 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14 through 15, it says, and no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also transform as ministers of righteousness, and whose end shall be according to their work. So Satan, in a subtle way, deception, he's transformed Santa Claus into a bigger than life figure and has sanitized the actual backdrop of Santa Claus, which is deeply rooted in pagan mythology and other things and all, and idol worship and false gods. And we just continue to just peel back the layers and just be able to see the truth. When we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 19 through 20, it says, and what say I then? That the idol is anything or that which is offered in sacrifice to idols in anything. But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice is sacrificed to devils and not to God. And I will not that ye should have fellowship with devils. So here's Paul writing in Corinthians, telling them that these pagan gods that you were once worshiping, like Artemis and Dionysus and all these other gods, they are actual devils. You're worshiping devils. So we see the formulation of Santa Claus when these Norse people or Scandinavian people were worshiping Thor and worshiping Odin, actually worshiping devils. They're worshiping demon gods, masquerading as these gods, leading people astray from the truth of Yahweh and his son, Yeshua, Jesus Christ. We have to know, which John chapter 8, verse 43 through 45, we know that he is a father, Satan is a father of lies. It says, why do you not understand my speech, even because ye cannot hear my word? Ye are of your father, the devil, and lust of your father you will do. He is a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of lies. And because I tell you the truth, ye believe me not. So the formulation of Santa Claus is based on lies and masquerades. Oh, it originated from Saint Nicholas was a saint in the Catholic Church, and he evolved there, and to honor him. No, it's a lie. Saint Nicholas never existed. So it's a web of lies that Satan has spent all these years. Last but least, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4 says, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is in the image of God, should shine unto them. So Satan is the God of this world. He has blinded people. He has even blinded people into believing a lie that Santa is this nice, big jovial character that brings kids Christmas gifts. And as Christians, we have to avoid getting into this foolishness, making our seem like our kids to have the belief in Santa Claus. The world's going to do what they want to do because they're blinded by the evil one, because that's their God. But when we come in to the truth, we come into Jesus Christ and we're born again, we have to lead our kids into truth. Don't tell them lies. I'll leave you with this. One of the most important things, one of the most fascinating things I ever read. It's a book that I read years ago, way before I got married, way before I started having kids. It's called 14 Things Witches Don't Want Parents to Know. And one of the parts the author was talking about Gene Roddenberry, the originator of Star Trek and writer of Star Trek, was young. He's a child, and he was raised in the Christian home. And he came to the reasoning that his parents was telling him all about Jesus, but he found out that Santa Claus wasn't real. And he was like, well, he processed his reasoning. Well, if Santa Claus is not real, maybe Jesus is not real, and some other thing. So it sent him down a road where, if you look at Star Trek, I used to look at it as a kid. They would show the reruns and all. Very entertaining. But Gene Roddenberry had a very new age feel, some other things and all. Very much Star Trek was very much Antichrist, just little subtle things and all. But we have to be spiritually woke in these last days. We have to just keep in mind that the enemy is at work, and don't have your kids worshiping Santa, thinking Santa's going to bring them gifts and other things and all. We need to tell them the truth and don't get caught up in the hype. And Jesus is the season. Jesus is the birth of Jesus Christ. It's a glorious occasion, and for him to be born and then 30 plus years later to die on the cross for our sins, that we may have eternal life, should be the main key focus. God bless. This is the End Time Shofar, End Time Bible Prophecy Podcast, and have a blessed holidays. God bless.